Morning, everybody. Just want to thank Beatrice and the Heritage Council for organising this event today. It's wonderful to spend a morning listening to fellow practitioners in the area of natural heritage and cultural heritage. I think, as Kieran said earlier on, there's so much good stuff going on, and we don't really promote what we do. My background is I'm a horticulturist and a landscape architect. I've worked in the Dublin authorities for all of my career. I spent last 10 years in Dún Laoghaire, and for the last 5 years I've been with Dublin City Council. But the other role I have is as chair of the Dublin Bay Biosphere Partnership, and I'll come back to that later on in terms of how that's governed. Dublin Bay, obviously, from the image here, is quite a large area. From a Dublin City perspective, I suppose the Bull Island is really important to us. It's a really unique place, and I'll come back to that in terms of the range of habitats. So this is a view looking over Howth towards the Bull Island and into the south of the bay. There's 287 biosphere reserves in Europe and North America. Euromap is the region of the world which Ireland comes into, and it covers Europe and North America, so it's Europe and Canada and the US. And the two biospheres in Ireland are Dublin Bay and Killarney Oak Woodlands. And they were both established back in 1981, and they've been renewed more recently. So we are part of a wider network. And actually what we find, and like this event here, it's actually when we get together with our colleagues in this network of biospheres, sharing information, sharing ideas, and sharing examples and methodologies, that's hugely important. So being part of that network is a very important part of the biosphere concept. And I suppose in this talk today, I'm going to be introducing the broader concept of what Biosphere is about, that at a very high level. But I'll also talk to you about explain what we do within the Dublin Bay Biosphere itself. So the concept is about conservation of genetic resources, ecosystems, species, and landscapes. It's about fostering economic and cultural development, human development and cultural development. And it's also about support for demonstration of good sustainable practice, environmental education, training, research and monitoring. And just on the cultural development side, there isn't any presentation that we would go to and talk about Dublin Bay without mentioning the cultural heritage. You know, from the earliest trading times when the Vikings came to Dublin to the development of Dublin Port. When the North Port Wall was constructed, what led to that was a survey carried out by Captain Blythe of mutiny on the Bounty, and that led to the construction of the Port Wall. Now we have the Bull Island 200 years later, and even the Victorian built heritage around the bay, from the Martello Towers to the bathing structures. We always bring those in as part of what we're trying to promote in terms of the biosphere. And in any biosphere designation, there's kind of different zones. So you have core zones, and the core zones are the Natura 2000 sites. And then you have a buffer zone, which are, and these are generally the parks that are around the bay. And this view is actually overlooking St. Anne's Park and over at Dublin Bay. And these are hugely important, even from the point of view of the Brent geese now, who've gone back to Arctic Canada to breed. They spend the winter here in Dublin, and you know, when the high tide comes in, they use parks like St. Anne's for feeding up, and other parks around the city. They go in as far as Ballyfermot and Finglas and other places. So these parks are hugely important as a buffer to the Natura 2000 sites, and that's recognised within the biosphere designation. And also then there's a transition area, which is really the more urban areas, but we do seek to ensure that there are sustainable solutions to urban problems going on in those areas. And actually we've colleagues here from LawCo as well, and that all these things tie into that, trying to maintain that. And these are the Natura 2000 sites, 9 of them, terrestrial and marine. And so it's a really designated place at Dublin Bay. and quite unique in terms of also being a capital city. And just looking at the Bull Island, there's 10 Annex 1 habitats on the Bull Island. And what's really important as well is that they're all interrelated, so they link into each other. So it's that mix of 10 Annex 1 habitats that makes the Bull Island a really unique space. And so we have a management plan for that, which we've renewed, and we will be launching a new management plan in the very near future. But it's kind of interesting when you look at the Annex 1 habitats as listed there. I mean, the question you might pose is, can we do that with cultural heritage? Is there some way of listing cultural heritage so we can have classifications for it? Because the habitats and species fit very well into these kind of classifications. And I'm not going to go through this because I'm not an expert in terms of the species, but we have a wide range, both marine and terrestrial, and some of those you'll recognize yourself. We're doing a lot of work at the moment on the marine side of things. We have a photographic competition being held, working with the underwater diving groups at the moment to bring in images of marine life, because the marine life in Dublin Bay is fantastic. It's actually spectacular, and we hope to promote that once we have that competition back. And I suppose the designation for Dublin Bay was there since 1981, but it's fair to say it wasn't really being utilised by any of the partners to that. And when I came to the City Council, I just thought this was a really important thing that we needed to develop. And actually at the same time, we were likely to be thrown out of the UNESCO network because we hadn't reported back to UNESCO in maybe 20 years. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, they had no report back. And there's a 10-year report that's supposed to go back to UNESCO. So we put together this periodic review, and I have a couple of copies here. It's quite a tome of a document, but it acknowledged the work. There had been good work that had gone on over the years, working with our partners in the National Parks and Wildlife Service. So there was a lot of good work done. We put it together and we sent it off, and we suggested that we would extend the designation to the entirety of Dublin Bay and create a wider partnership. So, which would include Fingal County Council, Dún Laoghaire, Rathdown, National Parks and Wildlife Service, and Dublin Port Company. And that was accepted. And in 2015, a year later, we were granted that, and we launched it with various dignitaries on the Bull Island. But it is now a designation for Dublin Bay. And that partnership is hugely important in terms of bringing in funding and making the project more sustainable. So we have a lot of buy-in to what we're trying to achieve. And it doesn't mean that some of the partners like Dublin Port is hugely important from an economic point of view. It's a huge driver of the national economy, never mind the Dublin economy. So they still have their long-term master plan, and the Biosphere is about working together to achieve joint aims, and it doesn't conflict with statutory obligations. At the time when I was selling the idea of the Biosphere for the Dublin Bay, these were the opportunities I was promoting. This is an old slide I just put up. And so it was about promoting Dublin's heritage and green credentials. And more recently now, Fáilte Ireland have come onto our partnership because their breath of fresh air branding our Dublin Bay fits perfectly into that. Now they are changing their branding slightly, but it's still about nature and people coming to Ireland because it is a kind of a green. They have this sense that it is a green place and the food is good and the environment is good. So it's about selling our green credentials. There's benefits for tourism, business and employment. It supports conservation objectives and environmental awareness, building social capital in local communities through volunteering and other engagement. And it was also about promoting the good work, as Kieran was saying earlier, the good work the local authorities do. There's a lot of good work going on, but we tend to hear the negatives all the time. And we also like to promote green infrastructure planning. The first mention of biospheres was back in the 1960s, so it was a very early example of models for sustainable development. And in 1981, the Bull Island was designated. And what surprised me is that this concept evolved even before the 1992 Rio conference, where the the terminology like Agenda 21 and biodiversity and sustainable development came in. The biosphere concept was there way before that, so it was a very early concept of that, and it's still valid today. Now, there's been various strategies in that that have come past, but I just wanted to mention the bit there on the Shanghai Declaration to make full use of, to enhance the urban sustainability and improve the relationships between cities and ecosystems of which they're a part. So biospheres are very much about people, culture, and ecosystems working together. They're not wilderness places that you try to keep people out of or restrict. It's people. So it's about culture and nature working together. At the end of that, there was the Lima Strategy, which is the most recent one, which has been launched by UNESCO, and this is really what it's about. There's a vision statement there, where people are conscious of their common future and interaction with our planet, and act collectively and responsibly to build thriving societies in harmony with the biosphere. So again, it's about societies and nature together. And I'm not going to go through all that, but I just wanted to mention on the last paragraph there, about it mentions sustainable development goals, linking into that, because sustainable development goals is kind of a more recent concept which has come out, but this is something we're all working towards. And in Dublin City Council, we are relating our work to these all the time. And I suppose if you look at what we're talking about today, the sustainable cities and communities is probably where the cultural thing comes in. But the biosphere is very much about 13, 14, 15, and number 11. So it is about life, quality of life, and just interesting to use this because these are being used much more. We're certainly using them, and we will be promoting it through the biosphere. This is our partnership, how it's constructed, and it's Fingal County Council. Obviously, they have Howth and that north part of the bay and Baldoyle Bay. At Dublin City, we have the Bull Island, and Dunleary Rathdown has the south side of the bay with Killiney Hill and Booterstown. National Parks and Wildlife Service, we've developed a really good relationship with the National Parks and Wildlife Service. When I came into the city, I got the sense there was a very adversarial kind of between the two, because one had a statutory requirement to do certain things and we were responsible for managing day-to-day stuff. But we've actually developed a really good relationship with them, and that's a really positive thing for the future. And then Dublin Port Company as well, who's kind of unusual to have them in that grouping, but the chief executive there, Eamon O'Reilly, is he's very aware of the need to be careful in terms of what they're doing. Obviously, they're looking to expand the port, but they're doing it in a sensitive way, and they're doing a huge amount of monitoring of bird species and feeding grounds, and that supports decision making into the future. So they've really bought into this, and they're a really positive partner to have on board. In terms of the themes on this side, education and research. When we sent in the periodic review, we had it was my colleague of mine, one of my team, Marianne Harris, who put that review together. We had about 5 pages of research that have been done by universities on Dublin Bay and the Bull Island, but yet they're not talking to each other. Universities don't talk to each other, and even you'll find departments within universities not talking to each other. So we want the biosphere to be a means for networking between universities. Business and tourism is important. We've put tour guides on the Dublin Bay cruises for the last 3 years. That's operated by Eugene Garrahy of Dublin Bay Cruises. Obviously does the trips to Dublin as well, but Eugene is involved in Dublin Bay. But we're funding the tour guides on that, so we control the message that's being given out to visitors in terms of the natural and the cultural heritage of Dublin Bay. And when they leave Dunleary, they talk about the heritage of Dunleary, so it's an integral part of what we do. Conservation, obviously, that's the core of what we're about. Ultimately, we're trying to conserve what we have in terms of species and habitats and the landscape. Recreation, we've a wide range of recreation groups, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then obviously cultural heritage, which we've been talking about. This is just a map of the recreation activities. It's not a complete map, but it's something we've been working on, just mapping the recreation activities around the bay. And we're going to do a study then to see how these might impact on the SBAs and SACs, and then then we'll be able to devise a management plan for recreation within the bay. So that's one of the projects we're actively working on, and that's something we'd hope to do something similar for the cultural heritage around the bay, the assets around the bay. Obviously, we know what they are; they're listed in the various city and county development plans. But we haven't actually brought them together as a composite as yet. And education is a big part of what we do. This is a school in Ballyfermot. The Brent geese fly into Ballyfermot. They land in the playing fields in schools. The kids don't know what these birds are. They don't know whether they're seagulls or what. So we do a lot of education work with these schools. And the kids have taken this on, and they understand these geese. And we're actually linking them up now with schools in Iceland where the Brent geese stop off, and one of my colleagues is going to Iceland shortly with somebody from Exeter University. So we're creating linkages between schools to try and ultimately to conserve these species, because they are under pressure in the urban area. So education is hugely important. This is something we're working on. It's a discovery centre for Dublin Bay, and we did a feasibility study some years ago, and now it's going forward. It's been reasonably well received by the local community, the NGOs, our various partners, and it's something we're going to proceed now to detailed design, and there'll be an EIA done jointly with that. But it is going to be a significant development in the bay on the Bull Island, and it won't be without its challenges. But ultimately, the purpose of that is to promote conservation. It is to promote the cultural heritage, and it's a place where schools and the local community can come and appreciate how important Dublin Bay is, and that's something to look out for down the way. And finally, I just wanted to mention that in 2019, our colleagues from the European and North American network, the EuroMab network, will be coming to Dublin Castle in April, and we have a 4-day conference being set up for that, amongst which the topics which we'll be talking about will be cultural heritage and various things we've been talking about here today. So I'd hope we'll have a website up and running next month, and I'd hope that you'd come along to that. It's April 2019. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to deal with those later. Thank you.